The NBA is in shock with a mega trade that sent Luka Doncic to the Lakers. But what does it mean for the Heat? Is Miami's plan for 2026 free agency still an option? We break it down on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. I have an incredible show for you today. A lot going on in the NBA world. The Luka Doncic trade is everything, and there are going to be ripple effects that we don't even begin to understand. Far and wide ramifications across the league, not just dealing with the Lakers and the Mavericks, but I think even in the short term and in the long term, dealing with the Miami Heat. Recording this on Sunday, several hours after maybe the most stunning trade in NBA history, David. I can't think of anything that comes close, frankly. We've seen big names get traded. We've seen big moves happen, but nothing out of the blue, quite like this, just out of nowhere. No leaks, not even knowing Luka was available. He's currently not even playing because he's injured. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but what's your first reaction?
Well, I would say the Shaq trade in 04 was probably close. It's just in terms of a mega trade before Twitter, before social media, before ESPN was breaking down all this stuff, and it was just a player, again, of that magnitude being dealt was just not something that was typically done. And so when a deal was announced, obviously we had heard rumblings, and I'm sure people in the inside knew about the connection or the lack thereof between Kobe and Shaq, but to still deal him to Miami, I think was a huge deal, and one that put Miami kind of in the center of the NBA universe for a couple of seasons, with Dwayne Wade growing into stardom and Shaq still very much in his prime at that point in time, as far as name recognition and marquee status and everything else like that. But
even that, I remember being on the bus going to school and mapping out a roster that had Shaquille O'Neal on it. So if childhood me had an inkling that the Miami Heat could acquire Shaquille O'Neal, this came out of nowhere. This wasn't even like De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento, where it's okay, how does this fit? What did we didn't even know. NBA teams didn't even know he was available. Apparently Nico Harrison, the GM of the Mavericks, only talked over coffee basically with the Lakers GM Rob Pelinka, and kind of concocted this whole thing out of nowhere. That's the part to me that's so shocking. To me, the earthquake nature of it felt like when Paul George got traded to the Clippers in the summer of 20. It was overnight. It was late. I remember being in Las Vegas for Summer League and sitting in the lobby of a hotel in Las Vegas with some friends, and everybody kind of got the alert at the same time. And we're like, wait, what's going on? And then of course you start wrapping your head around. You're like, oh well, this means Kawhi is going to the Clippers and all that. And then you kind of get. But we knew that these things were sort of out there. We knew not necessarily Paul George, but we knew the Kawhi thing was out there. This was this in the middle of the season, and the Mavericks were just in the NBA Finals. And let me remind you, the last time Luka Doncic played for Dallas, Christmas Day, before he tweaked the calf there, they had won 14 out of 17 games, looking very much a finals contender. And it turns out that's the last time we saw him in a Dallas Mavericks uniform. If you would have asked me, is this the last time we see Luka in a Mavericks? Who gets traded first, Luka or Jimmy Butler? And the answer was going to be Luka?
Insane. It really is quite a shocking development. Again, star level players. It's almost to the point where Anthony Davis, an all NBA player who was an MVP candidate at the start of the season, it's almost like an afterthought. It's you're not really thinking about it because he's a little bit older, maybe not the centerpiece of this particular deal. And the fact that it revolves around Luka, who is still young and a top 5 perennial MVP candidate being moved, that is quite shocking. So I don't know. There's so much to break down there. I was floored by seeing it happen. I thought it was a joke. You think somebody's account was hacked, and then you start to see more and more responses saying this is happening and stories being filed on it. And look, hours later, we're still processing this, and I think it's going to take the rest of the NBA just as much time to kind of just think about what this means, not just for their respective teams, but around the league and how it changes the way business is being handled.
We're going to be talking about this trade forever. This is, to me, one of the seminal trades in NBA history. I don't, if this brings the Lakers back to title contention, which I think like they probably need to go trade for a center, and they have to make some deals between now and the deadline. But Luka Doncic, he's one of the few guys in the league who, if you have him on your team, you have a chance. And I don't think LeBron James is even there at that point at this stage of his career. And as good as Anthony Davis is, he's a notch below whatever that is. Luka is one of those guys where if you have him, anything is possible. Or at least you believe that. And if the Lakers go out and make a couple of moves, go get a real center, maybe go and figure out some of the redundancies in the roster and stuff, they got to... Yeah. This 100% the Lakers are a contender. Like they are a move away from getting back into the inner circle in the NBA. I have no question about that.
I just feel like it's almost a clunky fit because you have like LeBron James, and then you have a player who plays like LeBron James, who needs the ball in his hands. Yeah, he takes the three a lot, but it's like it almost feels like it takes away from each other's strengths. I don't know. I'm curious.
And that's what they said about D-Wade and LeBron, and they figured it out.
But what did Dwayne do? Like he had to learn how to play off ball,
and LeBron's gonna have to learn how to do that. But maybe that's exactly what he's supposed to do at 40 years old. Like this could prolong.
Yeah,
LeBron. Like this
finally
could be
start
LeBron.
Doing it.
Right. Well, and they kind of tried to do it early in the season with Anthony Davis, JJ Redick talking about we're going to run the offense through, and they did it for a couple of weeks, and he looked like an MVP candidate, and eventually they kind of veered back into LeBron James and the way that he wants to play.
Yeah.
The good thing about Luka is that he does want to play the very same way that LeBron. He wants to slow it down, move the chess pieces around, and do that stuff. And I think now we're going to see LeBron go from like queen to knight on the chessboard, where he's not really, or maybe like going from master hand to one of the pieces now. But it's not a chess guy?
No, not a chess guy.
Oh. But let's go back to Miami and how it relates to the Heat. So Luka Doncic had been the guy that was on the top of the board for the summer of 2026. And the dealings with the Jimmy Butler trade conversations, everything that we understood was they are maintaining, or their priority is maintaining flexibility for the summer of 2026. They can create almost $80 million in cap space in 2026 if they don't take on any long-term salary in a Jimmy Butler trade. And the number one guy on the board that summer was potentially Luka Doncic. Now, I always had my doubts about that as sort of the strategy going forward because star players don't make it to free agency anymore. And Luka Doncic was eligible for a Supermax extension this summer for Dallas. Dallas clearly tried to get ahead of this thing and said, we don't want to pay this guy the Supermax. We're going to go ahead and trade him. And we got Anthony Davis for him, who's the best possible player I guess you can get if all the players like Luka are, I would imagine, untouchable like we thought Luka was. So you kind of go down and you're like, okay, we can get Anthony Davis, whatever. But so Dallas obviously tried to get ahead of this. I think the Lakers are going to, obviously, if you trade for Luka, you are prepared to offer him the max. Now, he's not eligible for the Supermax anymore because you can only get that from the team that you were playing for, but he's still eligible for a 3 or a 4-year max. Bobby Marks tweeted out the numbers, but it makes more sense for Luka to go ahead and take the 3-year max extension so he can re-enter free agency and then get like a 35% raise or whatever. Basically, essentially, if he signs this max extension, it's going to lock him in LA for at least through 2028, which takes him obviously off the board for 2026. So Not only that, but we're also getting rumblings that this De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio trade can get done pretty soon, and he's probably going to sign an extension in San Antonio. He was the other guy that made a lot of sense in terms of Miami looking for free agents in 2026. There's other names out there, David. Trae Young, Jaren Jackson Jr., whatever. I have questions about their fits. I also don't think they're worth waiting a year and a half around for. If you can get them, great, fine. But those are not Luka level players, not even De'Aaron Fox level players, I would argue. But this basically takes the entire strategy of waiting for 2026, in my view, off the table. Do you agree or disagree with me?
Yeah, I think we talked about that last week. Like the idea of saving salary cap space isn't what it once was. Like we've seen too many teams fail under the expectations. Like, well, we look at the Knicks, the Nets for years, all this assumption. What was the grand plan for the Knicks a few years ago? They were going to pull off what the Nets had done exactly. They were going to get Kevin Durant.
Kyrie.
They were going to get Kyrie Irving. They were going to be able to pull off this. And what happened? Nothing. Now they're in a better place. Obviously, they made a huge deal for Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns. That's the way to go. My bigger question, like I know that maybe we can get into this a little bit later in the show, but 2026, then that plan of signing a free agent is scrapped. But does that mean that Miami kind of changes their approach and says, if the Lakers can trade Anthony Davis, could they trade Bam Adebayo? Could they trade Tyler Hero after he was just named an all-star? Like, I think that's the kind of mindset shift that this front office has to have, is being proactive in that way in the future, is saying, despite how much we like our guys, we don't have a path to, as you've said many times, we don't have a path to getting that next superstar or lining up that next superstar. Free agency ain't it. It's via the trade. And if there's a player out there that's available, it's in the top 20-ish, or that you can manufacture and somehow make available, like Luka Doncic, who nobody knew was available, then that's the only avenue possible. Because otherwise, you're never going to get that top player.
Do you just start calling the Thunder and being like, "Are you interested in Bam for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?" Like, it's like, it just seems insane to do that, and that's the part that didn't get out. That's like, the Mavericks did not shop Luka. What they didn't even get both Lakers picks out of this trade. This on its face looks like an awful deal for Dallas, but they knew that they couldn't shop them because they didn't want word getting out in case I don't know. It's so confusing. But to your point about Miami, I think that those are the right questions to ask. I think figuring out where this leaves the Miami Heat is another big question, because if 2026 is now off the table, and we both agree on that, and we both agree that Luka is probably, anybody that says that Luka is not going to sign that extension to Lakers, you're kidding yourself. Every player wants to play for the Lakers. Like, they aim to get to the Lakers. They do not leave the Lakers. And you could throw state income tax in my face all the time. Stars don't care about that stuff as much as people in these low state income tax states think they care about. They don't care. He's going to make more money than they can ever imagine in Los Angeles. He'll be fine. So he'll sign that extension, and De'Aaron Fox will sign the extension in San Antonio because that's where he wants to be. And then Miami is going to be left to figure things out. What do? Do they consider the most dramatic options like you just pointed out, David, or do they go in another direction? We'll talk about all of that and more coming up here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. You just want your tickets and go. Well, it's been a great asset to be able to rely on Game Time Picks for a while now. Again, the deals make it super convenient. It filters out all the fluff so you don't have to worry about. And they've got all the great features that you're used to from Game Time, from their seat view feature to the best prices available. Whatever you're looking for, you'll find it at the best price via Game Time. Believe me, it's a game changer. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. Again, if you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. A reminder that your favorite NBA team is a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter. One stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shearer, Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. To answer your question, go ahead. Go.
Yeah, I was just thinking. Sorry, even as we're recording this, again, we're all kind of just taking this into consideration. Like, now that you've got Tyler Hero in all-star status, do you make a call in Minnesota if things go kind of south there and be like, we'll give you whatever you want on the roster in order to get Anthony Edwards? Is that their only path for Miami? I don't know if that's a conversation we need to have.
Now that NBA teams will just like start calling about like the most untouchable. Do you call Denver and say, what do you is Jokic available? Is there something we don't know? The thing in Dallas was that Luka was going to be up for this Supermax extension, and they have a new ownership group, and I don't know how they feel about paying him. All the indications that this ownership group was one of the richest in all of sports, right, and that they were going to, but who knows if they didn't want to pay him $350 million contract. I don't know if that had anything to do with this, but you know, Giannis is up for an extension. Is there concerns in Milwaukee, right? That's what you start looking at in this new apron world where you say, Do we want to be paying these guys $60 million a year? Or do we not? And who knows what kind of doors that's going to open up here. But I when you asked about like, are Bam and Tyler untouchable? Do you start shopping them around? I don't think you shop them around necessarily, because it was Dallas who came to the Lakers. The Mavericks proposed this trade. They said, hey, do you want Luka Doncic? And I bet like Rob Pelinka had to be like, is this a joke?
He did. He's like, what? Are you serious? And he's like, yeah. Let's do it. Let's talk trading away our franchise player. The guy who had the chance of maybe getting on the same level as Dirk Nowitzki in terms of fan appreciation and importance within the franchise. Unbelievable.
So
like,
to your point, like, and so if Dallas had called Miami and they didn't and offered Luka for Bam, 11 times out of 10 Miami does that. Come on. Like, they do it. So this is not Pat Riley falling asleep at the wheel. Get rid of that. Like, this was a unique Dallas and Lakers sensationalism. What do we call that? Like,
exceptionalism.
Exceptionalism. This was Lakers exceptionalism right in the Twitter era. This is what that was. Okay, the Lakers got a great break, as they always do. It always happens for them. But that said, I think if there is a pattern here, it's that teams are getting ahead of these things, these financial decisions, and these potential trade requests. We see the Kings shopping De'Aaron Fox before the trade deadline, just because they have decided, oh, this guy, they see the writing on the wall. He's not going to resign here. Let's get ahead of this. We just saw a very dramatic example with Dallas and Luka Doncic. For whatever reason, they decided that they wanted to get ahead of something like this. And clearly, Luka is a much more valuable player than Jimmy Butler. But Anthony Davis, like I said before, is as good of a player as you're going to get back if you're going to trade somebody like Luka, right? Assuming that everybody that is at Luka's tier is actually untouchable, you go to that next tier and Anthony Davis is in there somewhere, top 15-ish player in the league. If you told me that we can get a top 15-ish player for Jimmy Butler back, yes. Anthony Davis for Jimmy Butler, you do that 100 times out of 100 at this point. I do wonder, though, what the Heat's version of this would have looked like had they done this, had they traded Jimmy Butler when they should have, which was last summer, or maybe even before that, maybe before last trade deadline, like we just saw the Dallas Mavericks do a mid-season deal with Luka. Like, I'm so curious what the Heat could have gotten had they done it this way, where it just feels like the NBA, these front offices now. I don't even know if it's the smart move. I can't argue here that this was the smart move. I'm not saying that. Like, I don't think that this is the right thing for the Mavericks to do. I'm curious what it would have looked like had Miami gotten so ahead of it the way that Dallas did.
Is Dallas open for business? Like, even again, as we're talking about this, like, will they take Jimmy Butler now in a deal? Assuming, are they clearing the books a little bit? I guess they got AD
or whatever. I wonder
whatever.
where Kyrie fits in.
Yeah,
because you hear Nico Harrison. I don't know. I watched his press conference today because they had a game in Cleveland, which they got blown out in. Not shocking.
No kidding.
There. But he said, "Oh, this was a move about defense," and I'm like, "Well, the guy that doesn't fit in." He never mentioned Kyrie, and I don't know if that was pointed. And they obviously have a very strong relationship, Nico Harrison and Kyrie Irving. That's why they made that deal in the first place. But if this is about defense, which I also call a little bit of BS on, but if it is about defense. And Kyrie doesn't exactly fit into that. Like, he tries hard on deep, but he's not a known defender. And Jimmy Butler is, when he's engaged, a very good defender. And would you do a Kyrie for Jimmy Butler swap? I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, that's. I mean, Miami would. Would Dallas?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't.
Yeah. Well, if they can be fleeced once, can it be fleeced twice in 1 week? Like, I don't know. At this point,
you call, don't you? If you're the Heat's front office, don't you call?
Like, I mean, who else? I mean, can you get a Daniel Gafford as your backup center? Like, can you get a Spencer Dinwiddie to help shore up your backcourt? I don't know. Like, I mean, they're
trying to win now, though. They're not. Like, you hear if they think you're a win now player and they want Anthony Davis to play the 4 next to Gafford and Lively's hurt right now. I don't know that they're open for business, but I think you have to call and see. Okay, well. Everybody's a little confused about your direction. So who do you have that doesn't fit into your direction now? Because we all thought Luka fit in your direction, and apparently he didn't. So who doesn't fit, and do they fit with what we're trying to do? And if you're the Heat, you 100% call and ask Jimmy Butler for Kyrie straight up, and just see what happens. I would assume probably not, because if you lose Kyrie, you need some ball handling on that roster at some point, right? And like Jimmy already told you, he doesn't want to play point guard. So I don't know. I have no idea. But in terms of the what now of it all, that to me is fascinating. And if 2026 is off the table now, and Heat are still trying to trade Jimmy Butler between now and Thursday, I don't want it to be. I hope this doesn't sound so dramatic. This Luka Doncic trade changes everything about the way the Heat have to approach everything. Free agency is not an option. You're not getting Luka. So what do you do now? Who's the next guy? How do you build? And then in terms of this Jimmy Butler trade, what exactly are you looking for now? Because you were trying to everything was, we want cap space in 2026. Now I'm telling you it doesn't matter. So you kind of have to go back to the drawing board if you're Miami and figure out, all right, now what do we want in a Jimmy Butler deal? And how does that change our conversations over the next few days? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, no pun intended, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings, Prize Picks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. And if you're right, well, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting more on Jason Tatum on points. Not Luka Doncic on assists. He's not back for a while, and who knows how he's fit alongside. You can pick the less on him whenever he does come back, because fitting alongside LeBron is not easy. The best part, Prize Picks keeps it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast, secure withdrawals means you get paid quickly when you win. Plus, their Taco Tuesday promo gives you discounted player projections for even more value. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie Winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Rising your game. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Become a Locked On Heat insider. Use the link in the show notes. We have all of the information on the Jimmy Butler stuff in the days ahead. Free for 14 days, $4.99 a month after that. You get all the latest reporting, intel on Jimmy Butler from national sources, from our sources. And then, of course, you get the opportunity to ask us questions one-on-one. And then for our post-game shows, you get first dibs at those post-game reaction questions. But in terms of the what now of it all, after this Luka Doncic deal, Heat got to go back to the drawing board. We wanted space in 2026. That's no longer a viable team-building strategy for us. I would also argue we have Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro. Both of these guys are all-stars. We have 2 all-stars to build around now. What does all of this kind of mean in a post-Jimmy Butler world, and how can we best trade Jimmy Butler to turn the page in a way that gets us back to where we want to be? And if 2026 isn't an option anymore, then I think they should be prioritizing draft picks. They have 1 tradable first-round pick now. If we're understanding that stars don't make it to free agency anymore, right? Like LeBron James is not sitting across from Jim Gray and telling him he wants to sign in South Beach. That ain't happening anymore. So you need draft picks to trade for those guys. You need tradable contracts to trade for those guys. And I think you need financial flexibility. You want to get under the tax, because in this new apron world, all the sort of the team building restrictions that come with being above a first apron and above the second apron, that just hurts your chances of landing these stars. So I'm carrying in these conversations over the next few days that Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg and all these guys have with other front offices. I am carrying less about the 2026 summer and having $80 million of cap space. I still want flexibility. I probably still want a couple of expiring contracts to get under that tax. But more than anything, I want draft picks. I want tradable contracts, because if you look beyond Miami's All-Stars, Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, $26 million a year for Terry Rozier, $20 million thereabout for Duncan Robinson. Like your big non-All-Star contracts, not super tradable, right?
No, not really.
So you kind of want those tradable contracts. You want some financial flexibility in the near term. I think you need draft picks. I don't know if you're going to get this stuff for Jimmy Butler, but now, like the 2026, I'm not even thinking about that in these phone calls anymore.
No, I agree. trying to find a taker for Terry and or Duncan. I think that might be a step there. Like I hate to say it and especially in case of Duncan's part, but I don't know if anybody will even want Terry Rozier, but it might be something you have to find a way to include as part of any permutation of a Jimmy Butler trade. Is like you've got to be able to find those more tradable contracts. Like there was the idea that at some point that Terry might be tradable. Miami acquired him for relatively cheap in terms of a pick, and given his production at Charlotte that year, it just hasn't worked out. And I think you look around the rest of the roster, and you've got a lot of tradable assets in terms of young players that have potential. And Nico, Jaime Jaquez, not guys that you necessarily want to trade, but in terms of if you're looking to acquire a star or a star becomes available, or you somehow wind up like the Lakers did, falling ass backwards into getting a superstar on your roster, then you're in a better place, assuming you have either those tradable contracts that you talked about, which you don't, or you have draft capital. So I think those are the priorities, not necessarily what happens in 2026. That's no longer an option.
I agree with that. And I don't know that you need to shop Terry necessarily, because he is expiring next year. So there's not like a rush to get off of that. But if you can, obviously you do that. But I just don't know with Jimmy Butler, like trading Jimmy and Terry in one deal. We're talking about $60 million of stuff moving. That's really hard to move in the middle of the season.
I mean, it's in terms of trying to if there's a fourth team or a fifth team or something along those lines, like depending on how wide the scope for this deal winds up doing or expanding, if you can find who's willing to take on that salary in terms of trying to get their own salary cap situation adjusted, or taking on a short-term contract, or who knows? I mean, I don't know. There's so many different discussions and possibilities now. And I think like we're talking about this and it's just hours after the trade is consummated. And I think the rest of the league still doesn't know what the hell to do. Like they're still kind of figuring this out. And here was, Pat had a plan A. That's no longer an option. Now there's a plan B, no longer an option, plan C. And through no fault of his own, other than maybe if you want to look at, they should have gotten something done over the summer. It's what do they do next? And so,
how do they get what's the path to the next star? It's not Luka. He'll stay. He's going to stay with the Lakers. It's not De'Aaron Fox. It sounds like everything from what we're hearing, he's going to end up in San Antonio. So who's the next guy? Who's the guy?
Somebody
Somebody
who's on the cusp, like Jalen Williams, maybe from OKC. Like, Shea is untouchable. Is Jalen Williams the guy that you could say we can build around?
And what would you offer? It's
I
one first-round pick in Tyler Herro.
Yeah,
they're not. Oklahoma City's be like, what are you kidding? Like the whole league isn't taking crazy pills. Those are just in Dallas. Get out of here. What are you talking about? But I think you're on the right track, right? Do you look for the next? Is it like a James Harden situation where we're talking Cade Cunningham, man? Like he just signed his rookie. We're talking about 4 years from now where he's going to potentially be available.
It's the NBA is a long waiting game,
but I guess my point is I'm sick of waiting, because the Heat have been waiting and they were going to wait for 2026 and that blew up. Luckily, I'm glad this trade happened, because it was going to happen one way or the other in this way.
Yeah. And
I hope that the Heat realize that free agency is not an option. Now I understand that they kind of painted themselves into a corner here, and that might have been the only when you're looking at realistic scenarios. And look, and by the way, I should say, like, this wasn't the only thing. That was 2026 always was plan B. Plan A was can we trade for Luka before he becomes, like, that was always the plan.
Right.
But I just don't know, like, okay, plan A is gone. Plan B is gone. I don't think there is a plan C. There is no plan D. To me, there is no plan anymore. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the plan is we got Bam, we got Tyler, got a pair of all-stars, we got some young guys that we're excited about. And we don't have super tradable contracts, but we don't have these contracts that are awful either. Like, they don't have any terrible Bradley Beal contracts on the books either right now.
What's the biggest position of need that's going to take this team into superstar status, like or title contention, or somewhere within the periphery of that? A point guard, 3-and-D.
I don't know about position.
Star.
To me, skill set. It's star. It's advantage creator who makes the lives of everybody else easier.
Well,
a guy who can
again,
go out there and
you're
score
kind of
27 points per game.
You're stuck at 2 and 4. You've got Tyler, you got Bam. 2 and 4 are set, and we've gone through this exercise in the past. What's the next position that you're going to add? You
Just
can't
another
add
wing.
like even when we're talking
Give me a
about
point guard or a small forward.
That's what it is. So amongst those next stars in the making, who's a small forward and or point guard that could be got? Who might become contract eligible at some point, and the respective team that they're playing for right now isn't willing to do so. Like Luka
Is
was
Devin
a perfect
Booker
fit.
that guy?
He's the 2. He's not the point.
Could you fit him with Tyler? Could it be Booker and Tyler, and you do a little bit of what we got going on with Tyler and Duncan Robinson now, and you have just Bam kind of initiating?
No.
You don't think that's a good fit?
I don't think it works as well. We talked about it with Bradley Beal.
Would you trade Tyler for Booker?
No.
And just upgrade that spot?
Yeah, I mean, is that any closer to contention? Booker and Bam.
Not the way Devin
everybody
Booker's
else
playing this year. Maybe the way Devin Booker played a couple of years ago when he was an All-Star. A guy's going to miss the All-Star game 2 out of 3 seasons.
I don't know. Who's that next 3 and or point guard
Would you get when Boston ultimately has to make a decision on Jaylen Brown?
Ooh, yes.
At $60
well,
million.
that's a heck of a salary. Ooh.
That's the thing. It would be the only reason Boston trades him, but you don't pay your number 2 $60 million, but you would pay your number 1 $60 million. Is Jaylen Brown a number 1? I don't think so.
Tatum? What if they're stuck with Brown and they find a way to unload? You make the impossible call the same way the Mavericks did, and you call them.
Isn't like
imagine calling it Celtics front office and being like, "So, what do you want for Tatum?"
What's the latest report that Loria, the Eagles owner, might buy the Celtics now? Whatever.
There you go.
That feels improbable to me, but you never know. So did Luka getting traded. So, I don't know. That to me is the biggest question that Miami has to ask themselves is who's available next. I still do. You look at Giannis and say, fit be damned. Like he's one of the best 3 or 4 players in the league. Let's just go get that guy.
You'd have to trade Bam for him.
Probably.
Bam to Milwaukee for Giannis, and look, Bam gets to play with Dame, and Dame's happy. Like they'll be fine.
You get Giannis, Khalil Ware, and Tyler Herro. And then you got to build the roster out. I don't know. Like to me,
it feels like the other way.
I'm more about identify the next guy, and then you figure it out. But identify who's the next. And the most important part about all of this is you got to have the stuff to trade. You can't even, and the willingness to trade that stuff. But one tradable first round pick, even now, I don't know. Like Bam and 1 first, if Giannis becomes available, that feels like it won't be enough to get it done. Unless Milwaukee and Miami work out a Dallas Lakers little shadow trade. And the Heat have been trying to do that for years. They tried to do that with Damian Lillard and it didn't work. So I don't think that's a viable strategy either. So this to me leaves the Heat with just question marks all over the place. And if I'm the Heat, honestly, what I'm doing is okay, I want to position myself to a place where I can get that next player. Who knows who that is? The Lakers didn't know that Luka was going to be their guy until a couple weeks ago from the reporting around this. But how do we position ourselves? And in the meantime, we got a couple of all-stars we feel really good about, and we got some young players we feel really good about. Let Jimmy walk, add some role players to this rotation, and then unfortunately, you're just not in the spot to start dictating what stars you want. It's let's just try to be pretty good, I guess, for a little while. And I know that's probably not what Heat fans want to hear, but I don't know what the other
to your point, that's exactly what they've been doing. The kind of waiting game. There's just you have to be proactive though, and so now it's a very conflicting state. I mean, look, you're trying to get what you can in order to make the best proactive offer, right? But it's going to cost you one of the current stars in this team to get that next superstar. And I don't know that that's what Heat fans want. Like we just went through a week of like talking about Tyler Herro becoming an all-star and how well deserved it was, and he's made all these
trade him.
I don't want to trade anybody. I'm going to go on the record saying I'm perfectly fine with his team being 45 and 37 every year.
No, I don't want anybody. I'm not advocating that they should, and how I feel about Tyler Herro. I don't want him traded.
Yeah, right.
But if you're thinking about we need to build assets and we need to position ourselves and we need to be proactive, and we've tried trading Tyler Herro in the past for superstars and it hasn't worked. And I don't think this all-star nod necessarily changes much of anything there.
Yeah.
We still think Bam is the foundational piece of what we want to build here. He's the perfect number 2 to a superstar. We've always viewed him that way. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're going to trade Jimmy. Do we get? We're probably best case scenario. We get expiring picks and a draft pick, or expiring contracts and a draft pick back, or something, right? So that's not going to be just a Jimmy trade doesn't position ourselves to make that superstar deal. It gives us a little bit of something, but it doesn't give us everything we need. Talking about being proactive, you could, if you went out there and said, hey, Oklahoma City, do you want Tyler Herro for 3 or 4 first-round picks? Or whatever, I don't know. And do you just start and you just do it? And he's like, now we got all the picks, and now we got some cap flexibility, and we have Jimmy's gone, Tyler's gone, Rozier's an expiring next year. We can waive Duncan Robinson this summer and save 50% of his salary against the cap. And then we've just got that Bam contract, and he's the perfect, and the extension kicks in, so he's locked in. I'm not trying to talk even me into it. I'm just saying, like, what does proactive now look like? I don't know. And I don't even know that they should do it without an actual plan here, but who knows? I have no idea. I didn't think Luka was going to get traded. I didn't think that's what this looked like. I didn't think Anthony Davis getting traded is what it looked like for the Lakers, but
yeah. I
didn't think that De'Aaron Fox was going to get traded before the deadline. I didn't think Cat was going to get traded. I didn't think the Knicks were going to trade for Karl-Anthony Towns before this. I didn't think Damian Lillard was going to end up in Milwaukee. This is what proactive looks like. So what is it? Not advocating for it. I'm just saying, like, what is Miami's version of proactive? That's why they get paid a lot of money to figure it out, and they've not figured it out. And I think that's proactivity is the name of the game now, I think, in the NBA. You got to get ahead of it. You can't be waiting for it. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.